You know, when I look at what's happening with people out in the world, and I see how circumstances are really ruining people's experience of life, wouldn't it be nice to have something where you could rely on yourself? You could rely on something that's indestructible or immortal or invincible, and know that what you're relying on is something that's completely inside your control. You can't be manipulated. You can't be taken out of the game, because you are the game. So, you know, I see a lot of people out there that are struggling in ways that there's no way to win that game. Well, what happens if you give people a game they can actually win because they're the goal?
So what does that mean?
Well, okay, so I studied the lives of these people that were heroes.
Like who?
Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln. Was interested in what was it that made us love them so much we make statues about them. I was like, you know, like if life is really about living a life, and you've got Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln that we're making statues about, we put them in bronze because we want to be like them, right? I mean, that's why we immortalize them that way. Okay, so what is it about those people? I mean, I became very curious about their lives. What is it about Gandhi that made him Gandhi? And what I discovered was that Gandhi was committed to peaceful liberation. It was a virtue.
What do you mean he came into this world to do that?
Yeah, it was his raison d'etre, his purpose, so to speak. So he has a purpose that he's born with that he got to fulfill in his mid-40s or so. And I was like, wow, how did that happen? You know, you look at Martin Luther King, like, wow, I have a dream. Like, wow, how did that happen? Where am I going to get my dream?
You must. Do you hear that a lot from people? When am I going to get my dream?
Oh, we all admire it, but I think people are scared. They're afraid to ask themselves. It's too powerful a question, and it's too scary to think that if I ask the question, "What's my dream?" and I don't get an answer, that I'll just have to go back to mundane living. You know, 80% of America's workforce says they'd rather have another job. That's miserable to live in mediocrity, status quo. I think that's why we, you know, Martin Luther King Day. I mean, we have a day where we celebrate one guy that stood up and said, I have a dream.
So are you suggesting that it's okay for people to ask that question?
Well, you know, Gayl, you know, 200 years ago, if you'd have actually said, I have a dream, and spoken it out in public, you were burned at the stake, you were dismembered, you were, you know, people tortured you. Nowadays, if you stand up and say, I have a dream, there's no threat. Nobody's going to hurt you for that. In fact, if you do it authentically, a whole bunch of people are going to get behind you and push. So it's like, I think what's happened is it's like, you know, we have a whole culture of people that have come out of 5,000 years of being oppressed and, you know, living amid slavery and caste systems. And now, for the first time in thousands of years, we have an opportunity to actually take a stand for what's meaningful to us personally, to speak it, and to have it make an impact in the outside world. And I think because we've come from so many thousands of years where people couldn't do that, that they're somehow anciently fearful.
Now, we've called it a dream, we've called it a heart virtue, and basically both are the same thing. So if somebody were watching this, could they honestly say, I don't have that?
The only people that we would question would be sociopaths.
Well,
You know,
we're not questioning
everyone has a conscience. Everyone wants to live more virtuously. You know, we find $1 on the sidewalk and we, you know, go to hand it to the person that dropped it. You know, that's why we call it a heart virtue, is because the human organism yearns to be more virtuous.
What are some examples of a heart virtue?
Well, Mother Teresa was committed to compassion. You can see in her life how she lived was all about compassion. Martin Luther King was committed to brotherhood. Abraham Lincoln was committed to unity. Similar to brotherhood, only it's a little different. He was committed to keeping the country in one piece and keeping the people together. My heart virtue is spiritual integrity. I'm committed to seeing that people live in alignment with their spiritual purpose.
So, let's say I have someone that I've been friendly with my whole life. In every area of their life, when they were in Girl Scouts, they were like organizing stuff. And then when they were in high school, they were part of the student council and they were organizing stuff. And then when they got a job and they were working, in a short period, they were organizing stuff. And then as a parent, they were like a PTA. Is that a heart virtue?
No. Actually, there's a very clear distinction between a person's heart virtue and their skill set. Most career counselors will test people for what they're good at. What are your skills? Do you test high in math? I became an electrical engineer because I tested high in math. But what I do all day now is I do soft skills. I train people in soft skills. So there's a huge difference between your skills, which is what people say, oh, she's always doing this and she's always doing that. You should do that for a living. That's your skill set. Your virtues have way more to do not with what your cognitive skills are or your abilities. It has way more to do with your passions. For instance, movies give people goosebumps. They make them cry. So there's what you do that's cognitively reasonable, what you test high in, what people notice you're good at, and then there are the things that are meaningful to you. And this is so infrequent that we find someone whose career is in alignment with what's meaningful. Most people's careers are in alignment with what they're good at. Now, been my experience, you find somebody that's really good at something, and you give them a job doing it, and they're going to be bored in about a year. But if you find somebody that may not be good at something, and it may be something that has to do with, I don't know, empowering children or helping homeless women, find a place to live with their kids. That's something that people really take to heart. There are people that have virtues that are perfectly suited for an assembly